Welcome back to the Washington Outsider Report on the Coalition Radio. For those newly joining the program, my name is Irina Zuckerman, and I am the editor-in-chief of the Washington Outsider. With us today, we have Michael McKenney, who is leading an important humanitarian effort called Duffel Bags, which provides humanitarian supplies, life-saving equipment to Ukraine, but his company, in partnership with other veteran-owned companies, has also done that in other places like Israel and other hotspots around the world. And we'll hear a lot more about that today, how they work, what makes them different, and how they operate in the current global geopolitical context, what can be done, and what sort of challenges, humanitarian and other challenges that we are facing today. Thank you so much for joining us, Michael. It's a pleasure to have you on the Washington Outsider Report. Please, let's start with you introducing yourself to the audience a little bit. Tell us about your background, how you came to be in this area, and also tell us about your partners.
Well, my name is Michael McKenney. Most people affectionately refer to me as Doc McKenney. I spent 25 years roughly in the U.S. military as a combat medic. I have some special operations background and some weapons of mass destruction experience. I've crossed both sides of the equation on being both an active duty soldier on the federal side and a active duty National Guard soldier on the National Guard side. So our company was founded about 3 years ago, and it was the look at what I was going to do post-military as I was going through some health issues that required me to find a job that was going to be a career after the military. And in doing so, I established a company called Doc's Duffel Bag. And essentially what Doc's Duffel Bag is, it's a life safety research and development company that takes and looks at problems within pre-hospital care and looks to solve problems that affect not only the operator in the field that's trying to conduct the life-saving intervention, but it looks at patient survival. And we do a lot of research on current trends. We look at programs of record, and over the last 3 years, we've taken a look at some of the systemic problems that we saw within the U.S. military's program that got translated over into the civilian sector. And we created a bunch of tools and wrote a patent for some of the problems that required a more simpler solution to the clients that we service. And in doing so, we're able to decrease the cognitive and physical load on the operator. We're able to increase the medical interventions that are being provided and thus increase the patient survival from the point of injury to the hospital.
Could you give me an example of something like that?
So I can have you swap over to my side of the house, and I will share my screen.
Okay, let me see.
You're going to have to excuse me. My chair is being fidgety.
Okay. Great.
Okay. Okay, so one of the things that we did was, in looking at our universal handover tool, we wrote a system. So basically, there are 7 factors that are out there that deal with pre-hospital communication failures. Okay, and that's up on our website. The most common factors: operational conditions, failures of standardization, time constraints, missing information, lack of training, human error, and language concerns. So you have and we know, because we've been working with Ukraine, they've taken, and we have a lot of folks that have gone over there from post-military assignments or current military assignments that have taken the Department of Defense's TCCC program over there. Well, these factors and systemic problems within the DoD's program have kind of crossed over into the Ukraine conflict. And you have folks that are absolutely doing an amazing job trying to teach people how to do, tactical medicine under the most extreme situations. The problem is if you take an American-based product over to Ukraine without translating it, which it is now, it was translated about a year ago. I believe there was an organization over there of nurses that translated the card, working with the Department of Health Services and Deployed Medicine to translate the card into Ukrainian. And so it makes it easier. But one of the biggest factors is the most critical part of saving the life over there is if you apply a tourniquet. And so you want that information of the person having a tourniquet to get translated from one provider to a next, to a next, to a next. So that in the event that they're handed over, somebody doesn't cut the clothes off to provide life-saving care and cut through the tourniquet accidentally and essentially kill the patient. So we created a sticker that essentially says, I have a tourniquet. And early in the war, we crossed over and translated that into Ukrainian. So essentially, a field provider needs something very, very, very simple. You do a simple life-saving procedure, you need to send a simple message. So we created a sticker that was designed to be used in any environment that would go on the patient that says, I have a tourniquet. It would fit up on their body, or it would fit on their hypothermia material, so that it sent a clear message to whoever got them to say, stop what you're doing, make sure you focus on the fact that there is a tourniquet on the patient. There could be one, there could be multiples, but don't cut it off or don't lose sight of it, right? Because if you do, there's, health issues that can be associated with that. So we essentially, the last 3 years, have taken the DoD system and crosswalked it over into the civilian sector and global EMS with a whole bunch of products, to include something that helps operators on the ground if they have multiple casualties, is a CCP marking system. And this is capable of being translated in Ukrainian as well. Basically, it allows a medic on the ground or a medical provider on the ground to have more than one casualty to set up a CCP to be able to triage, or a hospital or makeshift medical facility on the fly. If they get more than, their patient load, then they can triage them appropriately. This leads into the best care for for the people that need it. It also gets into resource management, which is a very large problem in the Ukraine. Making sure that there's enough supplies to go around, because you want to do the most good for the most people, and you don't want to waste resources on people that unfortunately aren't going to make it, or require resources beyond what you're capable of handling at your location. So we decided to just focus on the areas that most people don't want to focus on, communication, documentation, and triage. And it's a very large problem, and it's been a systemic problem within global EMS, right? We want to make sure that we send messages from one person to another. And we have, read through plenty of research that has shown use case studies where, patients, aren't taken care of, or you have operators or first responders out there that are making do with what they have, because there's been tools that have been there, but they haven't been the best tools. And now there are better tools. So we want them to have better access to lowering their cognitive and physical needs in every stage of the process. So it's been a labor of love for sure. So, and we've had some great partners that have worked with us on the whole thing. So this is the non-technology side. And then on the technology side, we teamed up with NASA to design a RF driven patient over the horizon patient tracking system, so that if you're on the ground, you could essentially track that patient from the point of injury all the way back to the medical facility. But it also would allow for in partnership with Dave Spence at Bloodstone mission down in Florida, it would also allow for the resupply via drone back to that location. So either you would support the medic by giving them what they need right then and there. Why? Because we would know what they need. Or two, if the resources were beyond that capable area, then we could fly those additional resources in real time, so that folks on the ground wouldn't have to wait for ground or ground ambulance or a vehicle or some kind of aircraft where you're putting other lives at risk. Now we could fly a drone and resupply them in real time. So we're kind of working both sides of the equation.
That's really impressive. And but you keep mentioning we. Who are the other organizations, and how did you come across them?
Well, the first group that we met was Dave and Jackie Spence from Bloodstone Division.
Mhm.
Both of them are ex-Canadian soldiers, and then Dave joined the American military and became a Special Forces medic. And he runs a company down in Florida that handles large-scale medical build-outs. He's partnered with his chief medical officer, Ken Jones, who is a former Air Force medical planning officer who used to work for their anti-terrorism unit. So those two gentlemen have done large-scale operations on a global scale. And recently, Dave's been involved with Canada in delivering their blood program and some heavy rescue equipment programs through their military. So he and Ken have a very much larger global scale of what's needed from the point of injury through the care. And this isn't just humanitarian efforts. This is your standard, Department of Health type of issues, vaccinations, medical supplies, but it's also on the operator side, it's their equipment. So perfect example. You have Ukrainian police officers that are now on the ground trying to handle civil law enforcement. So that's your regular emergency management stuff. The fire department rolls out, law enforcement goes with it, or you have, human trafficking issues, or you have domestic calls, or you have people just that are in need, and they're trying to do that inside of an active combat zone, and they're not always equipped properly to be able to deal with the fact that we know that from reading the stuff that's in the news, in the online talks and the teleconferencing that we've done, these law enforcement officers are going up against assault weapons and military grade explosives and bad actors that are well equipped, well funded, and are essentially outgunning the law enforcement. So Dave and some of our other partners can't have the ability to outfit those officers with the equipment that they need, so that you can put that bag in the truck, so that when you go out, you have it if you need it, to do the more advanced work. So, sort of like if you were going to look at, say, New York City's Hammer team, or if you were going to look at Atlanta's advanced tactical response teams, or anybody that would be doing advanced work, right? You would have your law enforcement officers, and you have those that were trained in more advanced tactics that could help back up those other officers or those other agencies that are on the ground, where they would need that additional training. And we have those people in country that can provide that training. We're part of another organization. We're tied to another organization that comes from that background that can provide that. So Dave and Jackie were the first people that we met. We hit it right off. Dave handles he handles a very large portion of the UAV program. He handles the resupply program. He handles blood products on the battlefield. He handles heavy rescue, large country build-outs. And he's been working in Ukraine for a long time with his partnerships, and he's put millions of dollars over the line, working with, agencies that had initial funding, right? Initial NGOs that came through and had lots of funding and wanted supplies. He supplied a lot of stuff. He has ties to the UK, and so that has been a great working relationship. And then we met Emil Reynolds, who is a former captain that came out of the Ranger Regiment. He served with one of the sister elements that I served with, and his background was infantry. And he started a company called Combat Bound, and they're into some very advanced R&D work as well, to include creating a litter for fast extraction of patients from critical instances. And I'm going to move you back over to my Ukraine page. And they just recently, I'm very excited for them. They recently just received their patent for their product, and it's here. Okay. So the product I was talking about before, I'm sorry. So right here is where I've talked about 7 most common factors. I didn't realize I didn't share the screen. So, and then, so this covers the 7 common factors. And then a little bit farther down, this covers the CCP marking kit that we can translate into Ukrainian. And we'll have, you'll have access to all this information so you can edit it as you need. So going back to our Ukrainian side, so Emil and his team created a lightweight litter that's right here. And in the early days when we were talking with, this is currently being used by Ukrainian Special Forces. And I believe that he gave them to him. And so in the process of his development early on, they went over there and they're being used. And we were fortunate enough, we pretty much all of the work that we've done talking with anybody in Ukraine, we have translated over all of our work so that people over there can understand it. So Combat Bound handles several aspects of the work that we do. They created the litter, which we helped them with on their testing, their field testing on the west side for the US government. And then they got into electronic warfare. So one of the problems that you see in the Ukraine right now is drones that are being taken out of the sky. And there's, based on, electronic warfare jamming and stuff like that. These gentlemen created for the Air Force a electronic warfare jamming device that we have the ability to incorporate into drones so that you can't take the drone out of the sky. So unless you shoot it down, but from a jamming standpoint, they have the technology to counter that. So where this becomes very important as a team is we were instrumental in helping with the development of the Ukrainian package, so that we created a 2-phase Ukrainian package. It was worth about $50 million. And what it would do, it would provide 5 armored containers full of diagnostic equipment inside of it, with a mobile launch platform and rescue vehicles that would then be able to move, because it would be mobile. It would be able to move around in Ukraine as needed. So if you were evacuating people from a train and you needed medical supplies and medical personnel where that train was departing from before they got on, you could put one there. If you had troops that were far forward, then you could put one there and you could move it around as needed. But it would also help break down smaller teams so that those smaller teams could get in and out of areas with rescue vehicles quickly and bring them back to wherever that main vehicle was staged. And it was all armored, so it would protect everybody from, small arms fire and shrapnel and stuff like that. But it would also be, it also would have a mobile platform on it to launch a drone with a supply unit there that could move stuff forward to the troops, or excuse me, or it could get into a close enough location for humanitarian efforts to drop supplies, to drop medicine, to drop, immunizations, to support the department, the Department of Health. So it's a pretty bold initiative. It had two parts to it. We have worked through the first part of it. We're waiting to see if there's going to be governmental funding, which there hasn't been up to this point. And or we could find an angel investor that would be willing to take on the project. We figure it would take about 6 months to start delivering everything in the country. So we started this project over a year and a half ago. So, and it's been reviewed by, the Ukrainian military command. It's been pushed all the way up through the land component commander for Ukrainian military. It's been signed off on. We're just trying to, get it across the line funding wise. But this is a pretty bold initiative, and it would put some very serious resources in the hands of the Ukrainian people. And it would definitely change the tide of what we think is, some of their most basic needs. And the nice part about it is the entire team is all part of it. Every single component of the organizations, our company, Bloodstone, Combat Bound, Steri Medical, all have a piece in this, and to include Amulus, all have a component in this that we all came together. Now, when we came together, nobody was looking for a paycheck. Nobody was looking for, the big giant funds of, oh, it's a $10 million project, but it'll take us 5 years to do it. And there'll be 15 overruns. And, by the time you're done, it's a $100 million project. It's just, everybody came together and said, this is what we're going to do. And, one of the great parts of this whole thing is Gary McGill out of the UK is our international spokesperson. He's put a lot of us together. This is, his ability to make phone calls and talk to people. And that's how we met, was through Gary. Gary's superpower is being able to connect the right people at the right time, based on everybody he talks to. So we would never have met Amulus. We would never have met, Emil Reynolds from Combat Bound had it not been for Gary, taking all these phone calls and saying, okay, these are all pieces of a puzzle. How do I put them together? And well, there's synergy over here. So let's get you guys together. And by the time we were done, we had 5 or 6, 7 companies all working together towards one main effort. And that was to put this project in Ukraine. And, everybody was like, listen, there's no money on this for us. We're not looking for that. We're looking to put serious resources there. And we all know, even Gary knows, he took a personal trip over there, and went around the country, and he saw firsthand what a lot of us have all seen in combat, as we've deployed for the United States military. All of us have combat experience. All of us have been on humanitarian efforts. All of us have, worked through, seeing suffering at all kinds of different levels. Gary went there himself in his effort to provide, what effort he could to help bring people together. I mean, what he does is absolutely amazing. So the collaboration is huge. And it's really all driven around, we've been saving lives for so long. That's all we want to do. We just have a very unique skill set of people that a lot of us came out of special operations community. We're not really grandstanders, we're here, we're doing the work behind the scenes. And, if the generals and the politicians and all those guys want to, take all the credit, then they can have it. We're just the folks that, provide real services and real solutions because we can to the people that really need it. And it's been amazing who we've met online and who we've talked to in person and who we've taken phone calls from at all hours of the night. We have folks that contact all of us at all kinds of hours to ask questions, to have us look something up, to check a piece of information, to, pick our brains, as far as, what could be, going on, or to call us to help solve a problem. And that's what happened here. We got involved in, with one of the ministers of, one of the ministers in the government. And, Gary set this up. He made the introduction. And then Emil became our, and Combat Bob became the point person because they had a contact as well. And we just, we took all of our military experience and broke it down so that each person, each organization, each company that did a specific thing and did it well, they just continued to do it. So a lot of the information that went back and forth has been a collaboration of everybody. And a big component of this was Dave from Bloodstone, who had been on the phone calls early, even within the United States, governmental system, because of all of the counterfeit, medical equipment that was getting sent over there to help units that were on the ground sift through some of the donations that were made or the equipment that got shipped over in bulk that was dropped off that said, here you go. And that was amazing. I mean, don't get me wrong. The effort that went into getting stuff there in short periods of time was great. And, people want to do something. The problem is sometimes that their efforts aren't aligned to a larger organization, or they're buying stuff that they're not quite sure about, whether, and everything that we do, if we wouldn't sell it to the US government, if it wouldn't go into the hands of an American soldier, Canadian soldier, an Australian, or, any of the partners that we work with, if it wouldn't go in their hands, it's certainly not going to go over there into anybody else's. You get one shot to save a life sometimes, and you do not want your medical equipment to fail at the moment you're trying to do it. So we're pretty big on making sure that stuff that we, push across the line is the same quality that, we would be putting in our own aid bags.
And what are exactly the needs? Because the situation on the front in Ukraine appears to be quite dire, certainly from a humanitarian perspective. But, because of the overwhelming amount of media focused exclusively on the combat aspects of it, on the strategic military operations, we don't really get an exact sense of just how much equipment is needed. So how much have we been able to supply so far, and how much do you think would be necessary to keep things going at a rate that's, I mean, I wouldn't say acceptable, but that actually is able to keep up with the level of basically
Of combat?
yes.
Well, David and the organization, and all the efforts. I mean, I can't even account for the amount of time if you were to put a dollar value to it, because that we just give. Dave's organization and the teams have pushed more than $1.4 million across the line. I think Dave said that it has affected about 235,000 people on the effort there. As far as taking phone calls and the time spent, talking to people or looking up information, none of that is, we don't charge for any of that. And, any information that we have that makes somebody's life better, we make sure we try to give it to them. Or get them connected with somebody that needs to have it. We look within our networks to see who we have that could help support them. So, and you're right, the operational side of who's moving where, who's attacked who, what is the operational status, what's been destroyed, what's still standing. That's a huge focus right now. And there's, billions of dollars being, pushed into the offensive side of, making sure that, Ukraine is able to, one, retain their lands, two, get back what they've already lost if possible, and three, search for the people that have been taken, or, build back, some of the critical infrastructures that are available. I mean, you're talking, billions of dollars to rebuild Ukraine back to even what it was at the start of the war, and medical supplies are in short demand. And we get calls all the time talking to folks that are talking about how, there's or agencies are so much that they're fighting over the small limited supplies of stuff that are coming in. And don't get me wrong, there's lots of aid coming in from, large organizations, U.S. military, UE, all those guys are doing amazing jobs shipping in supplies. But at the strategic level, the guys that are down at the ground, some of them just don't see anything. And they're relying on people, walking supplies across, or, small NGOs that are bringing in stuff, that they can get in there on their own, any way that they can. We've even set up our own secure pipeline from the United States into Poland. And then our team that's on the ground over there that works with Dave, that's partnered with him, they're there to get it in Poland and bring it into the Ukraine. But there's a huge difference. If you have large governmental support and it is focused into organizations, then that's who's going to get it. And it's going to funnel down from the top. The problem becomes is if you have corruption within the organizations or infighting, then what you have is, segregated areas where somebody gets a lot, somebody gets a little, and somebody gets nothing at all, and where we saw that early in the conflict, we just created a model that said, you tell us who you are, right? And you're going to be an official organization, right? You're going to be a hospital. You're going to be, the department, the Ministry of Health. You're going to be the Department of Defense, or the, Ministry of Defense. You're going to be, the Kiev Police Department, right? So whoever. You're going to be an organization. We're going to have a key person that is going to be our point of contact there. We're going to get all the official paperwork squared away. We're going to get your request. We're going to make sure it's what you want. We're going to try to find the funding, or if you already have it, if you already have funds, then you buy it. We're going to get it to you, and then we're going to have a user end agreement signed that says, not only did you get what you asked for, or as much as we could supply, then we have people on the ground that can train you on it, and you're going to sign the document that said this person got this training, got this equipment. And it eliminates the whole, I went online, I saw a Ukrainian, support page. I wanted to do something. I donated $1,000. Well, where did it go? What did that organization do with it? Did it run their operation? Did it pay their staff? How much of that $1,000 did you actually buy? Did you get $1,000 worth of medical supplies or generators or fuel, food or water or whatever that you thought you were getting? Did you get that? Or did you just get a nice little form that says, thank you for your donation, here's your tax write-off? See, the difference is we set it up and said, you're going to buy this, right? You're going to buy it because it's a business. You're going to go online, and we put kits together for different situations for medical providers. And I will take you over to, if you give me 1 second, I'll open up Dave's page. We built kits for medical personnel, and it starts from as basic as I just have a tourniquet, and goes all the way down to a field medics kit that would be the same that I would build for a medic in the United States military. It is the most cutting edge stuff that you can get for field medic. Now, if you look at the price, it's just a little under $3,000. That's because it's at cost. Our time to build it isn't in there. Our overheads for our companies are not in there. This is just what it costs to buy that kit and put it together. Now, the difference is you buy that kit and we ship it over there, we're going to tell you who got it. So if you were buying the kit and you said, wow, I spent $3,000, I'd like to know what happened with it, we're going to be able to tell you. because one, you're going to get an invoice, right? Because you're buying it and you're gifting it to Ukraine. So you're making the donation, but you're buying it. That means that we have accountability to you to deliver the product. Not we're just taking money to arbitrarily figure out what they need over there or what we want to bring or what we're comfortable with. We worked with the Ukrainian military to build this kit. They've reviewed it. This is the price they sold it. Now, if a person buys that kit, it will go to Ukraine. You're going to get a bill for it. And then when it gets over there, we're going to tell you who it got to. Or if you come back and say, boy, I'd really like to know if that medics kit got to somebody, we're going to tell you who it was, because there's going to be an end user agreement for that particular kit when it gets over there and the medic's been trained on it. So there's transparency, honesty, ethical business practices. And we're telling you that we're going to deliver on what we say we're going to deliver. And how can we back that up? Well, we've already, our team has already put, $1.4 million over the line. So, there's no question about the reputation of whether we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. We are. So, and that's where we kind of looked at the bigger scale of, then we get away from political agendas, we get away from corruption, we get away from folks just shipping stuff into Ukraine and then having it sit in a warehouse and never get to anybody. We also are not putting medical equipment in the country without them being trained on it. So that price includes them being trained on it by our people. And who are our people? Former special operations guys that are already in the country working to train folks on how to do, pre-hospital care in a combat environment. So they're going to physically pick this up. They're going to get it to where it needs to go. And then the person who gets it is going to sign off, and they're going to sign off after they're trained on it. So we took a lot of those problems that we saw early on from the places that we talked to. We talked to, the governmental leaders. We talked to people that were on the ground that were telling us what was and was not arriving in country. We saw that, medical supplies, they're in high demand, which means they're, big for black market operations. They're big for waste, or sitting somewhere or potentially being destroyed because, of the amount of fluidness on the battlefield, right? So we try to eliminate a lot of that stuff and give the person who is making a donation the comfort to know that they're working with legitimate people who have gone through the process of aligning with the government to be able to say, this is what they're asking for. This is what we built. This is what you can purchase. And if I would not give this to anybody else, this is an exact kit that I would give to an American service member or any coalition member. So that's where we looked at a lot of the problems that were coming out of the Ukraine, and we tried to stay off running into those hurdles that would trip us up, as we move forward to offer support to the Ukraine. And these are smaller representations of what our larger proposal looks like. So it was just a ground floor kind of movement. And Ken and Dave and those guys have worked on scaled operations at a country level. They just know a lot of the inside information that you should be doing that a lot of people just don't do the back work for, so that it makes it easier to get to the, if we say it's going to take X amount of time, we get to that time and there's a product there for them to have. So that's kind of where we took a different approach. And we're pretty transparent with the folks that we're working with, as far as, if you're, whether you're a government agency or a private citizen that's just looking to do something, you're going to get the same amount of information no matter who you are. You're probably going to get more than you need or more than you want, but we're going to ensure that you have it so that you know your hard-earned money was well spent and got to the intent you have a goal in spending that money, right? You want help to arrive to somebody there. We're going to ensure that it happens.
So yeah, it seems like you are able to overcome a lot of the issues we've heard being criticized simply by not being a traditional NGO, because NGOs are infamous for high overhead, for lack of accountability mechanisms, lack of communications and transparency, and internal political infighting and personal agendas. What is it? Is it still a big issue in Ukraine overall? Are these organizations still popping up and taking away oxygen? And why is there not more of a streamlined approach at this point in the war, after we've seen this landscape and we've seen these problems? Why isn't the Ukrainian government or the US government recommending more of this sort of a focused approach?
Well, there are a lot of companies out there. I mean, you go to a company that's selling offensive. We basically just think of it from a standpoint of companies that are selling offensive stuff to Ukraine through the U.S. military. They're doing the same thing. I don't know how their pricing structure is for what they're doing, or if they are, and a lot of times they're receiving government funding for their projects. So they have contracts that, have fixed pricing or whatever. The difference is we have not broken over the barrier onto the U.S. government side for the medical care, because we're a bunch of small companies that haven't publicized a lot of our work. So so a lot of people know who the companies are, within the community. But as a whole, we're not standing there going, hey guys, we're over here. We are, but you need to, on the governmental side, you need, I think you need, and we've seen, this, I think it's who you know and how big your story is. And quite honestly, you're just dealing with a bunch of soldiers, that have started companies, and we're absolutely horrible about telling our story. I'll be honest. This is the first interview I've done where any of the companies have done any major talk about any of the groundbreaking work, other than within the organization, within the communities that we talk to. Nobody has, nobody's been, in the news. And, I mean, Bloodstone, just, designed, Canada's military's blood program. Nobody knows. Emil Reynolds created a brand new litter, that could change how we, deal with, moving casualties, through his, research development. And he's working, on a large scale operation to revamp, his country. He's from the Philippines. He's looking to help revamp the military and civilian disaster management program on a global scale, right? And this is just a former, military captain from the Ranger Regiment who is working towards his PhD, and he's working on things behind the scenes, to make things happen, to make things better for, people in his country and around the world. Not a lot of people know we're out here. So if you don't have a lot of people that know you're out here, especially governmental agencies, right, then the issue is if we don't know you're here, we don't know what you have, we don't know what kind of solutions you can provide, then we can't help fund your initiatives, right? So this is a large step for all of the companies involved in this, humanitarian effort. This is the real first big push we've had for, public exposure. So nobody's good at talking about themselves.
Well, unfortunately, there's too many people who talk way too much about themselves and then end up not doing such a great job. So I think I'll take this over that anytime. But there's something else that you've mentioned to me previously that's very interesting. You mentioned that a lot of these conflicts, even if the political issues may differ, ultimately on a tactical level play out very much the same way. And now there's been, a concerted push by certain parties to portray Ukraine as some sort of a unique operational environment fraught with more corruption than anywhere else in the world, and that for whatever reason it's different. But it sounds to me that based on what you're telling me, the challenges are very much similar to other places around the world, regardless of the political situation, that the humanitarian challenges, the combat challenges, this human element is very much similar to other conflicts. Could you expand on that a little bit? Because I think that's a point that's not really being drawn very much in public discourse.
Well, I think yes, and active combat within Ukraine is affecting every aspect of the country. And if you were to take the political aspect out of it, right? Let's just talk about the effects of active combat within a country, minus the political agenda. It flows down into every aspect of your critical infrastructure, right? So when we've seen it within Ukraine, right? Critical infrastructure was targeted. So communication systems, cell phones, satellite, all that, that package is attacked. Where does that affect other things? Hospitals, right? Hospitals were targeted. So now I read an article, about a family doctor who was doing, local city, family care, who was learning how to do trauma medicine, so something that he had never done before. And he was, saving lives doing it. But your critical infrastructure has collapsed, so you see widespread destruction. So now that leads to increased, capabilities for disease. And, now we're not talking, now you're talking about, waste management, you're talking about disease processes, you're talking about immunization and general health care for folks, you're talking about hunger, starvation, lack of supplies, lack of heat, temperature conditions, as you've gone through multiple years of conflict. Now you've gone, you have people in the summertime that could suffer from dehydration to people in the wintertime that could freeze to death. So all those things are affected by active combat situations, plus migration of people leaving the country, right? So you have people that have health issues that might have been, or were being, controlled. We're being taken care of by local medical providers within their community. They spoke the language. They had, an ethnic diversity within their community to get the care that they needed, and now they're getting shoved out of where they've been. You have fear and uncertainty. You have, you have monetary, you have a fiscal collapse within the country. So what is your money worth? What can you get? Are you leaving with anything? Your possessions, everything. So your life is uprooted, and then you're dealing with stress from, potentially life-threatening situations. You're being displaced, and you're going to an area where they're trying to make it better, but they're so overwhelmed that, the resources that are needed to make it really better aren't always there. Or some folks don't, you get back into those, communicational problems, right? You have communication breakdown, language concerns. If I went to the Ukraine as a medic and I'm like, okay, I'm here to help. If I ran into somebody who spoke nothing but Ukrainian, I couldn't communicate because I don't know Ukrainian, right? So my efforts, my heartfelt efforts of going there to do something would be great, on this side of the ocean. I get on the other side of the ocean and that person is suffering, and I'm trying to relay to them that I'm there to help them, but I can't communicate, or I can't communicate effectively, then all that help in the world doesn't mean anything to that person, because I'm adding a level of stress because I can't tell them that I'm there to help them. So, when you look at, I guess you could, sort of relate it to people who are moved during natural disasters, right? Your home, your possessions, your life, your community are all uprooted very violently, and then you're asked to go somewhere else, and then figure out, can I ever go back to where I was? Or if you do go back, is anything that you had when you were there even there anymore? So I think there's so many different factors with this, and the amount of money that will be needed or has been put into all of those resources is astronomical. You're talking billions of dollars, people that will be affected with this for generations to come. A young adult who is violently pulled out of their home because they lived on the Ukrainian border with Russia, and now that area is no longer under Ukrainian control. Well, they don't have a home to go back to. So if they were violently pulled out of there, then they're starting over again. And it's hard if you're trying to do that from a humanitarian rescue camp, where resources are limited and you're trying to connect with other people that So, I think one of the things is, there's a lot of different needs that are there, and some of them are just basic needs. Can you provide some level of comfort so that that person understands that it's going to be okay? Can you get, for the folks that are still there, can you get them, medical supplies that they can't travel to anymore? Why? Because one, they maybe can't move around freely within a country, but two, that resource that they went to, that facility, that medical facility, is no longer there. It's been destroyed. So now they have to go even farther to try and get care. So a lot of these larger scale problems, our team has experience with, to come up with solutions to say, okay, where can we leverage all of our experience, what's available on the market, what we're currently capable of putting together, and how can we make that situation a little bit better? So, but it's very difficult. You have, so much going on with active conflict that it is affecting regular civil, entities that run every day, law enforcement, hospitals, fire departments, support services that would be in the country. I don't know if you had, visiting nurses, just think about all those eco structures that are inside of a community that are just not there.
So what part of the messaging that we are seeing in the US political circles and elsewhere, not just in the US, but certainly here, is to focus all funding exclusively on combat-related weapons and just to help Ukraine win better. And there's been actually not only lack of interest, but there has been very active discouragement from contributing US government resources or even private resources towards humanitarian needs. I have a concern that this type of messaging undermines combat operations, because if you don't have enough medical supplies and humanitarian support, then you have a higher loss of lives, you have a collapse of these institutions, and you may not have people to fight with at the end of the day. So how do we what could you tell to these politicians and others who are making this message and making it seem like humanitarian needs are inferior and not as important and not actually complementary to the combat needs?
Well, it goes back to, the military's, everything, yes, in tactical combat medicine care, we've always said that, bullets downrange is good for medicine. Why? Because if you're eliminating the enemy, then American soldiers aren't being hurt. If they're not being hurt, there's less casualties, there's less resources needed, there's, less people, less people are injured, so there's more people for the fight. That's great, except and you're absolutely right, there is a huge focus on the operational side of, trying to maintain the country. And as far as the higher politics, I really don't get into the higher politics. I mean, I read them, but I would have to say too, you have to take some of that with a grain of salt, because it depends on where it's coming from, who the source is, how vetted it is. Did somebody do their research or just grab a headline? I really don't get into that whole side of the house, but you have to, one has to support the other, right? So if you have healthy, well-fed, well-supplied, and resources behind your troops, then that makes your operational environment better, right? If you have better weapons on the battlefield, then that creates a superiority for your forces on the battlefield, right? And then there is potentially a distance between where the conflict is and where your civilian population gets involved. However, in this case, you don't have that, right? You don't have that separation of military operations and civilian, sector. There's no boundary. You're right. There's no unaffected areas, right? Even because you have active conflict going great distances within the country that are affecting those kind of things. So as far as the political side, I really don't have any comment as far as that, because I really don't get into the political side, because I think you go down a rabbit hole that could be fought either direction depending on what your views are on it. So we kind of stick, our organization, our effort sticks to basically saving life. That's what we're looking to do. And so it's become very difficult to find organizations that want to fund the Ukraine humanitarian effort. I think there's been some bad actors that have done things to hurt the reputations of NGOs. I think there's some amazing NGOs out there, and we've worked with some of them. Tip of the spear is a former 18 Delta, not an 18 Delta, an 18 Charlie, I believe, is an engineer in the Special Forces. And he's got his 503c set up, and he's taking donations, and he's actively going over there and removing landmines for first responders and humanitarian efforts. Does nothing on the combat operations side. He only worries about clearing lanes and keeping people safe from landmines that have been prevented, have been buried throughout the country, so that first responders can respond to people in need and humanitarian effort workers can get where they need to go. It's doing an amazing job. And we worked with another organization called Rocky Mountain Medicine, former 18 Delta, and funniest thing, real estate agent who just decided he was going to do something. And he set up a 503c, and he went over there multiple times with 18 Delta, and they worked on medical supply, worked with the field hospitals, did amazing work, and were in and out of the country multiple times. And it's just a matter of, there's a lot of folks that want to do something on a grander scale. It's hard. It's hard to find that money. It's hard to convince organizations, especially, when you're talking about large scale operations, because then people get very skeptical. Skeptic. They become very skeptical. Yeah, excuse me. They're very skeptic on your ability to provide the services that you say you're going to provide, right? We're looking for $10 million. Can we provide what we say we're going to provide? Sure. Can we show it? Sure. But finding that person or finding that government entity that wants to donate $10 million to a project that says, okay, you know, we've been burned before, you know, we don't want to get burned again. Or, you know, how are you going to guarantee that it's going to get across the line to do what you say you're going to do? So that's, I think it becomes an issue of, and a lot of people, I'll be honest, lots of people gave millions and millions and millions of dollars to Ukraine to support efforts for humanitarian efforts. And do I think it was all tracked adequately, leveraged to the best of its ability? No, we know it wasn't. Right? I can read the news and see, there's, articles out there about, agencies or organizations that didn't, do the best that they were supposed to do with it. Right. And so I think it becomes an issue of, if you're going to donate money, it goes back to the person who I think wants to donate it. Are you looking for that reputable place? Are you asking questions? And are they actually, is the organization actually aligned to somebody there that's in power, right? Are you working with the, Ministry of Health? Are you working with the, Ministry of Defense? Are you working with the, law enforcement guys specifically? Can you give a name? Do you have a letter? Have you done the back work? Do you really understand the process of what's happening over there? And we're small potatoes compared to some of these large organizations. And, it's sometimes it's a who knows who, and, and how, and who knows about your story, and what kind of project is a focus for governmental money. Sometimes their focus is not what we're working on. They're working on something at a very, very strategic level. We're working on something at a very operator level, right? That medic kit is designed for a medic in the field. That's who I want to find, right? The $10 million armored container program, that's for the that's for the Ministry of Defense, that's for, the Ministry of Health. They already know about it. So, it's just a matter of them helping us, when to find that funding or find that person that says, "Ooh, I really like that project. We can fund that for you." And then work with that agency that says, "Great. How long will it take before it's done?" But for the average person, one of those basic kits that we built comes at all, and this is why we did it this way. For the average person who wants to make a donation because they believe in what's happening in Ukraine, we wanted it to start at a purchase of about $35 and go up a little higher to somebody who wants to do a little bit more. So everybody had the opportunity to make a donation based on whatever their spending area was. So, but there was accountability from anybody who spent $10 million to somebody who spent $35. And I think that's the difference. So, and just finding those people and getting the word out. We can only do so much social media ourselves. So, and I'll be honest, because not a lot of us have social media experience, it becomes very difficult of who do you trust to tell the story to, that it's going to get out there so that people go and look at the website or watch the interview with you and I and say, okay, these guys are really honest. They're all above board. This is nobody's getting taken for a ride here. These are, elite soldiers, with elite reputations, and they're partnered with, my wife is an emergency management student, right? She has been on humanitarian efforts around the world. Dave is military. His wife has been military. Emil's military. Everybody in our organization is all military. They have solid reputations and solid backgrounds, and there's nothing that you're going to find about us that you're going to go like, oh, well, they're right leaning, or they're left leaning, or, oh, they were in the news for, political scandal, or, oh, they didn't pay their taxes on time, or their companies are, millions of dollars in debt. No, there's none of that stuff within the organizations. These are just a bunch of veterans, small, veteran owned companies that got together, and I just became no different than Gary in England is our international spokesperson. I just became the spokesperson for the group because a lot of those guys don't like to talk,
Mm-hmm.
Outside of the circle like that, or, and it's a lot of information. And the nice part about the way our companies are set up is we're centered kind of as a R&D center. So we work with everybody. Somebody has a good idea over here, we kick it around, and then we bring it back. And everybody kind of puts it all together. And that's why we became like a little research and development company within our own, entrepreneurial veteran organization. It's like a little mafia of small veteran companies. And we just became kind of the R&D hub and a lot of it became because we went after NASA technology to build something that was so over the horizon, for patient care, that it touched the NASA technology, reaches into all the companies on all the different projects that they work on. Our NASA technology flows over into that area. So that's how we kind of became the little hub. But the main effort,
Mm-hmm.
the main effort for us, the main effort for us is really on the medical side, is on the local side becomes George Rodriguez from Stereotech Medical, because he's also working within a hub free zone. So that allows us to access free shipping, non-tax shipping out of the United States through his efforts, to be in a hub zone. But then Dave and Ken handle, and his team down, his contacts handle the much larger scale of some of the stuff. And we're working within the DoD in small scales, but on very specific projects. So it's just, that's kind of just how we came to be. But I think we just kind of looked at it from a standpoint of reading a lot about where a lot of the other failures were coming from. And then the people that we were talking to on, online, and people that we took Zoom calls, and Gary set us up with, Gary must have set us up with at least 50, 60, 70 calls, of people within the country that were, trying to get stuff done. And we helped a lot of folks just, working through some of the processes so that they understood some of the animal problems that were on this side that were going to affect them on the ground floor over there, as far as getting stuff, or, trying to make contact with people who they should be talking to, at their local level, as opposed to, just trying to run an effort on their own. And there's been a lot of successful NGOs over there. Don't get me wrong. There's been some absolutely amazing NGO work done, and a lot of people have self-funded stuff. And, it's absolutely amazing to see the folks that, stepped up to say we're going to do something, and including the folks that we work with. We just kind of we just did it in a little bit different manner because we wanted to stay off a lot of the problems that some of the other organizations were dealing with.
So that brings me to another point that you mentioned earlier, which is searching or helping people who've been taken, who've disappeared. There's been, at various points in time, an attempt at media campaigns to bring attention to the children and other Ukrainian citizens who've been essentially abducted from the country, taken to Russia or elsewhere, and who've just disappeared. And there's a lot going on about the human trafficking aspect of it, and both within the country and outside of it. What is your what exactly is the big picture here? Why isn't there more attention to this situation, especially since it does have particular military potential repercussions. These people could all be brainwashed and turned into soldiers for Russia. And on the
Oh,
humanitarian side, how do you even begin to deal with it, something like that?
that's a very challenging problem. In the U.S. military, we get trained, on human trafficking, right? We get the, you know, training on how to identify it, what to do, what resources are available. But there's a much larger side piece to that if you happen to actually deal with that, right? So there's a whole channel that happens on. And we've been approached, on numerous occasions about how to deal with human trafficking. I mean, one of it is awareness, of course, right? Good awareness training, good awareness campaign is always a good thing. And it's difficult. So you have your your military's primary effort is to defend the nation, and your civilian law enforcement agencies are designed to police and handle that kind of stuff. The problem is that you have active combat going on. So you have people that are in the absence of law enforcement structure, right? They're going to be bad actors. You have, you know, stories about, folks being taken from the Ukraine going back to Russia. And while I have not personally met anybody, that has, been over there tracking those people and bringing them back, we know that there are folks that are out there that are trying to do exactly that, right? How do you track people? How do you bring them back? How do you find these locations? And it becomes difficult when you talk about, if somebody's taken from one country into another, how do you even find them? Because then it becomes an issue of, well, now if we're flying aircraft over, so perfect example, I'm Ukrainian, I get taken back to Russia. First of all, does anybody know that I'm gone in the chaos?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Can civilian law enforcement come get me? No, right? Can the government, who's actively fighting with the other country, open a line of negotiations to potentially get my return? Probably going to be difficult at best. Can I take my military assets and fly them over another country or deploy troops into another country to potentially get those people back, being hostages or, you know, or people who have been removed from their country of origin? That becomes a very, very, very difficult question. I mean, those are just some of the things that I think of right off the top of my head that become real problem points. The other part of it becomes is the area that people would have been taken from. Ukraine has been unable to take that territory back, right? So you can't even put Ukrainian people back into that area that could then start working that problem, because that physical area, that territory isn't even theirs right now. They don't own the territory itself. So, when you look at how do you address that kind of a problem, I think it is absolutely monumental. And in the scale of a lot of other problems, I think it's very easy to be something that kind of gets lost in the mix, right? The people that are super passionate about it, that are saying it's happening, it's happening, it's happening, are talking to people that have this many problems on their plate with this many resources to try to fix this one problem, right? So it just becomes another problem on the pile. And it's one of those, can we address it now? Maybe, maybe not. If we could, what resources would be available to do it? And how would we deploy those in an active combat zone? So the reason we've been approached is because of our project here. So the reason we got approached was because some of the folks that we knew Okay. You can see my screen right now.
Yes.
Okay. So this project is an over the horizon system that is non-GPS based. Okay. And now the way we came up with this project is it was designed to augment our non-technology solution to into our technology, our integrated technology solution that involved AI and NASA development. And the technology our company has worked with NASA. Now, this project has been briefed to NASA, and this is where we're kind of in a very unique spot with NASA. As a small business, NASA usually does not issue a lot of technology all at once to one company, unless you can really prove that you've got something that you need all this different technology for. So our company has been issued 22 different has been issued 22 technology licenses under NASA's small business portfolio. And that creates every component that we need to create a tracking system in real time for a patient globally. Now, we took in our NASA portfolio, when we talked to NASA, we identified Department of Defense, healthcare, and first responders as our target area. I don't get into retail. I don't get into, any other areas. Those are my three focal areas for development. But this technology is designed to do a couple things. And this is where we could see kind of an offshoot of the development. So imagine a technology that we would use to track a patient that would affect DOD and healthcare responders and that side of the house. But that same system being augmented just slightly so that let's say you had a high risk population in a situation like Ukraine, and you wanted to create something that could track them in real time on the globe. This could potentially do it. Or you wanted to have your law enforcement agencies within the country hot spot particular areas where there were abductions and they wanted to be able to track them in real time, right? This technology would be able to do that. So kind of like, you could almost like geofence an area in a, let's say you wanted the ability to actively know, say, potential areas for threats for law enforcement or drug trafficking or human trafficking or weapons trafficking. This system would be able to in the future be able to do that. That's kind of where those are some offshoot kind of ideas that have come out of our technology resource, our development of our program. A lot of it I can't discuss only because of the disclosure of what we have, but that's essentially what it basically becomes. Is it's a non-GPS system.
And has there been
So it would just be it would just work on radio frequency.
has there been any success in using it to locate missing people?
Oh no, we're in the research and development stage of putting it together. We're probably 3 to 5 years from
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a very bold and aggressive plan that one of the problems we had to first address, and this is why, is because we we went to NASA trying to solve problems that are out there. We tried to build a program that was out there that would not fall into the same traps as currently available products that have shortfalls. So in doing so, we look to make a more robust system
Mm-hmm.
where there potentially is a system out there that could do it now, but it has limitations. So we went through the R&D part of looking at where the limitations were to find the right technology so that we could basically offer a solution in the future or work towards a developmental product at the end that would not have the same inherent problems as stuff that's available now.
Mm-hmm. No, I get it. Yeah. Yeah,
So
absolutely. Wow. So basically, there is still a huge obstacle in place for the current situation, and it may take a very long time to resolve in the even in the best case scenario.
I think a lot of it becomes, you know, what kind of small steps do you do?
Mm-hmm.
I think so. The folks that would be handling your human trafficking would be your civilian entity or your governmental entity law enforcement officers, right? That's, I mean, that's that within any large country, some kind of federal law, I want to say federal, but some kind of countrywide law enforcement structure is there that handles with that, right? And I think it becomes awareness, but I think if you take some of the stress off of law enforcement, and that could be better training, better equipment, better resources, then potentially maybe they would have the ability to do something better. I think it's a matter of, it's hard to sit inside of a crisis and figure out how you're going to do things better when you don't know what resources are out there that are better to do it with. And I think Ukraine has been, they're focused on fighting a war, and all the efforts at that. So how do we try to step back just a smidge to say, okay, we have this problem over here. Do we need to find somebody that can help us with that? And if we can, who is it? And who's going to deal with that while we can't physically deal with it, right? So delegation of some of the stuff that needs to come down, and I guess it becomes an issue of how much of a priority it is it for the organizations that are supposed to be handling it. Are they so overwhelmed, or are they not? I mean, it's kind of hard to have functioning critical, infrastructure when your people are being displaced and leaving the country.
Sure.
So, I mean, it's it's kind of like do a lot with a little.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the end result is, you're only good at doing so many things well, and there's only so many hours in a day. So how many different fires can you actually put out? You know, so I think it's just absolutely, you know, an overwhelming problem that I think everybody's thinks that there's more critical problems. And don't get me wrong, the loss of civilian populace within the country is a huge problem, right? I mean, those are potentially people that will never be found or will never come back or could end up going to very unsavory people, and their lives are not going to be better where they're going. So how do we help that from happening? And we're certainly here to help. I just don't know if on a grand scale of something large and overwhelming, we're certainly nowhere near at that scale, but certainly smaller scales, we would leverage whatever resources we have in our network to put the right people in contact with whoever is dealing with that problem.
Well, thank you so much. You raised many important points, including the prioritizing of general international rescue efforts and building up that infrastructure that could deal with that and prioritize that as a full-time effort and on a much larger scale. We're not nearly there yet, and there's been some major human trafficking successes, but on local levels within the United States or within particular countries, usually Western democratic countries, not necessarily in conflict zones or conflict environments or authoritarian states. But uh, let's hope that this is something that's going to be taken seriously, because frankly, this can happen in other conflict zones as well, and the more chaotic a situation gets, the more likely various actors to take advantage of that chaos.
I think you made a great point. It happens everywhere. Human trafficking happens everywhere. You don't need a conflict for it to happen. It's a matter of, are there tools, available? Can we leverage, new sciences, new technologies that put bad actors on notice to say, we're coming after you, we're looking for you, we have, we're putting things out there for people to, to protect themselves, and we're coming after you if we find you. But the other part of it too is I think it gets into a bigger arena, is, how does government play within that? And I think it goes both sides. Like you said, there's successes and there's failures. So I think it becomes a very mucky pond to get yourself into when you think it's just cut and dry, because it's really not. So it's a huge challenge, but we're certainly working towards something here that's going to hopefully make a difference, for the right actors.
Well, thank you so much for the amazing work you and your partners are doing. It's very inspiring to hear about this amidst all the bad news and negativity and scandals. It's good to even focus on small but effective things that kind of gives gives people something to latch onto. Think globally, act locally. This is a prime example of how very specific, concrete efforts could bring concrete results, and I think that's enough for many people to kind of move away from the very jaundiced view of conflicts of what's going on in Ukraine and towards putting their energies and their money to something that can be helpful. I hope that once this video launches, um, that both government agencies and private donors will be inspired to learn more, to reach out, and to also, of course, invest into these kits and provide life-saving support to so many people out there facing direct danger. And because you guys definitely deserve all the support you can get.
Oh no, we really appreciate your time, today to interview us and to get us to tell our story. It's not just conflict areas, it's anywhere in the world, disaster management, where there's human suffering, there is a potential solution, so we'll work with anybody that needs, our kind of assistance to help, them solve a problem. It was amazing to be able to tell a story for myself and the group. And it's there's a lot of bad news out there, and sometimes you're right. You just need to know that somebody's out there that doesn't have to always be in the limelight. There's lots of folks out there in the background doing good things, and we're just one of those groups of people. So I think it's a bigger message of, I think when you think about how do things get done, think about, who makes the news? Well, the United States giving money to Ukraine. It's a big deal, right? It's in the news, makes lots of publicity, but how many NGOs and private veterans or private entities have gone over there, that have been there, who have received no, no visibility. They have self-funded, they've given up their jobs, they've gone away from their families, all for a cause that they believe in. And it doesn't have to be Ukraine. It could be any disaster that happens around the world, or humanitarian efforts that are happening every day, everywhere. Folks are passionate about that. And it's not about the almighty dollar. The dollar gets things done so people get what they need. But for a lot of folks, it's not about driving a brand new car or having a brand new house. It's just about having money to save lives. And that's what our group is about. So I really appreciate your time today. And it was amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And everyone watching this, please check out duffelbag.com, as well as the other websites that we had an opportunity to see during the presentation. Please feel free to ask any questions, reach out, and certainly share this story to anyone who might be interested or willing to help. And of course, the Washington Outsider Report will be back again next week, Tuesday night at 9 p.m. as usual. Thank you so much